2, 1. Good day, everybody. My name is Carlos. Welcome to another episode of My Life Without Limits. I believe this is season 3, and then this is episode number 2, which is very exciting because we had last week we released the last episode, the first episode of our season 3, which was pretty great. I hope you enjoyed it. But before we go on to our episode number 2 and our wonderful guest we have today, I just want to welcome our wonderful host, our co-host, Leah. How are you doing, Leah, today?
I'm doing really good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
You got enough sun?
I don't know it. I look red. I don't know why. I told them, I said, maybe I'm like super angry or I get warm in here. Perimenopause. I don't know it.
No, I don't.
I'm almost hot.
I don't think it's that either. So, yeah. But no, it's good that you look great as always. And yeah, welcome to today's podcast. Thank you for putting up with me again. And yeah, but we have a wonderful guest today that you were able to connect on social media. The magic that you do, and I would like you to see if you can introduce it to all of us so that we can start our wonderful conversation.
Yes, very excited that we have a new friend. And it is the power of social media and just connecting with people. I love it. So we have Sarah Wiebe here with us from Reach Higher Support Services in Calgary. And she's going to tell us about everything that she's doing, and then also a little bit about her life as a mom, which is something we always like to get some, perspective on and everything. So welcome, Sarah, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here with you guys and have the opportunity to share what we're doing and really, add into our community. And there's always a need for support. So I'm happy to share what we're doing. Yeah.
Yes. And I know it can be difficult and it's overwhelming, right? There's so many things that you have to do. So having somebody out there that can really help like you, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we'll just share a little bit about, what we do with Reach Higher and a few other things. So with Reach Higher Support Services, we provide supports to families who are looking for aid services or respite services for their children with FSCD funding. Our agency was really born out of necessity. I think, our society does a really good job of supporting those children and giving them the therapeutic supports that they need, but oftentimes, what the parents need gets lost a little bit. And so, yes, it's wonderful that they get this funding and they have access to these supports. But what I've found in my just over a decade of working with these families is that they don't know what to do once they get that oftentimes. And, I just got to the point where I got frustrated having to say to people, well, have you looked for an aide on Facebook or Kijiji? Right? It just feels so impersonal. And so we provide those services for families. We offload that stress that families are facing by doing a recruitment process. So they get to really handpick their aide. It's based on what they're looking for. So we do what we call a family first recruitment model. We basically do a very thorough intake with the family, find out, what kind of supports would fit their needs best, what kind of scheduling, what experience they want somebody to have, right down to, what kind of personality traits work best with your child.
Right.
Because these supports are not like one size fits all, right? And then we go and find that person for them. And we have that person start providing those supports in home. And the feedback that we've received so far is that families are extremely grateful that they are not the ones having to do all of that heavy lifting. And yeah, so far it's been very, very successful. And we're very honored and grateful to be able to offer that to families and offload some of that stress a little bit.
It's a huge deal because, yeah, you're right. A lot of people don't know where to look. And I think it can be scary to think, I'm going to look for someone to be with my child on Facebook or Kijiji. And I remember when I was when I was first had my daughter when she was younger and just wanted a casual babysitter, and somebody saying, why don't you look on Kijiji? People post all the time that they're, looking for this. And I'm like, that's scary. It's scary to think. And I think having somebody there to sort of help vet them and have all that work done already, that's a huge weight off the parents' shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do, right? We do all of those checks before a family's ever introduced to somebody. And we really make sure that, who we're bringing in is educated, even if the families don't mention that in the beginning. Having been on the other side of things, having worked within this field for so long, we have a really good idea. I have a really good idea of what supports are required for which families, and then they help to really just paint that picture and we bring it all together.
Oh, that's a big service that you're doing. Yeah, especially, how did you get started in that field, in the field of all of this?
I think like a lot of people, I've fell into working with children and youth with varying needs and strengths and their families. And I originally had started out actually working with high-risk youth and marginalized populations who were experiencing poverty and all of the stresses that came with that. And I guess I slowly, like many people do, just found myself in this kind of niche corner of really loving, empowering these individuals to push past any of the limitations that had been put on them, whether those were verbalized or not, and their families as well, right? And so to really support that, it's been a really incredible journey for me within my career. I love the work that I do. I've done so many different types of roles, and I consistently kind of hear the same feedback over and over, and that it's slowly just kind of led to where I am now.
Right.
And how many years have you been doing this again? Like how many?
Just over 10.
Just over 10 years. Oh, just over 10 years. So it's been quite a while now. So.
Yeah. I've worked with hundreds of kids and hundreds of families, I'm sure. It's although the role of an aide or a therapy assistant is actually not really regulated. I think that's kind of one of the other pieces that we're really targeting, is making sure that these families are actually getting somebody who's going to benefit their child and not just fill the hours, right? It's easy enough to have somebody just show up at your house and fill those hours, but it's about those really intentional moments that they're creating that are going to add to that lasting change and the impact that they're able to have. So making sure that families have access to that too is just so important.
Yeah, and making sure that the aide has, it's fun if they, they have things in common, like if they like Marvel movies, and it becomes a really good social aspect too, because then they can, have something to talk about and something that kind of, I don't know, just gives them something to look forward to. It's not like, oh, someone's coming again to speech therapy, or I got to do this, but maybe a little bit more fun and like having a friend that's just helping you out.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I tell all of our aides as well, is, the less a child realizes that they're working on these goals, the more successful they can be, right? You don't want to sit down and say, okay, we're going to do this now for 2 hours. It has to be fun. It has to be engaging and motivating. Us as adults, we wouldn't want to do those things. I wouldn't be very motivated to do that. So it's about really putting yourself in their shoes as well. And so much of what we're doing, as I said, is helping families to really kind of to bridge that gap that families have between diagnosis and receiving funding versus what that actually looks like, and how to navigate that journey.
Have you I know that this is your own, have you worked with other aides, with other organizations as well? Because I've seen in my experience, there's some aides out there who, it doesn't look I don't want to push on any aid here or anything, but it doesn't look like they might be working the goals of the actual person who needs the help in that regard, right? So in different organizations or different places. So have you had a chance to create some sort of like not bonding but conversations with other organizations who have aids regarding how to work better with clients, or is it only on your sector?
Yeah, so at the moment, it's just within Reach Hire.
Okay.
And, we offer a lot of, I guess, kind of coaching supports to our aides. So we make sure, obviously, that they have that experience, but we also provide that ongoing support because the role is in itself very, I guess, isolating as far as like you don't have coworkers necessarily that are working with you in that role. So it really does come down to the aide to take on so much responsibility to collaborate with other therapists and to do all of those pieces. But what happens when you come up against a wall? What happens when what you're trying hasn't been working, or you've run out of ideas? We have coaching for all of our aides. We have a data bank of resources. We have a toy lending library. We have so many resources for them to support them in that role, to ensure that they are providing the highest level of therapeutic supports. And so I personally have worked with many different agencies throughout my career, and what I'm finding also is there are a lot of other agencies, other therapists who are reaching out to us to help find supports for families as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so there is an opportunity to collaborate, which is really exciting.
Yes, yeah. And is this like totally different than like somebody looking for like a daytime caregiver? Like it's complete, or do you do that as well, or is completely two different things?
So the type of support is different, but there obviously is some overlap with, an individual for their day-to-day life. They have to be kind of implementing some of those goals at times, right? So there is some overlap. So there's different types of funding, one of which is like respite care, where you really are doing that caregiving. And then this would be developmental and behavioral supports, where you're working with that team of therapists who've created goals based on what the families are looking for and the children are looking for, and then implementing that. So it's kind of much more with the aid services, it's much more, I guess, intentional with that time. Yeah, so really utilizing that session. But we are actually in the midst of creating various different play groups and respite groups for weekend care and out of school breaks, summer. There's a really, really big need for that as well. And so offering, whether we go swimming, and it's more of like a rec kind of play socialization group.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That's just awesome.
Yeah, so we're kind of trying to identify where it seems like there's kind of a lack of supports and add in those areas as well, including, as I said, supports for parents. I am a medical mom myself. I have a medical kiddo, and I find using my experience and having the experience being on the aid side, the therapy support side, working as somebody in this field versus being a mom experiencing this field. It's very different. And I love that I have both perspectives. So that's really where I'm targeting now, or coming from, is providing that wraparound support to the children, but not forgetting the families as well.
Can you explain a little bit about what the difference is, like, to how you see it as a medical mom instead of a not in the medical field? Like, how is it different in compared to not have that background?
Yeah, so I, coming from nearly, as I said, before my daughter was diagnosed with everything, nearly a decade in this field, working with, as I said, hundreds of families, I thought I had a really good feel for what it meant, and what they were experiencing. I had a lot of conversations with a lot of parents over the years who shared their concerns, who were vulnerable and opened up. But until I experienced it for myself, I realized I didn't know. I didn't know what it felt like. I didn't know how isolating it was, how much advocacy is really, really required. And how exhausting that can be.
Yeah. So even though you had some experience in the field and then your child gets a diagnosis, you're not like, oh, no big deal. I can handle this. This is what I do. It's totally different, right? Yeah. Because it's just that personal connection and you're like, oh my God, you know, like it's not one of those, I've been preparing all my life for this. I'm ready. It's like, oh, whoa.
And I think that was what hit me really hard too, was, you know, I sort of put it onto myself, the guilt of I should know what to do,
right? Because
I've had so much exposure. I should know. I shouldn't feel this way. That led to a very dark place for me. So I just have such an appreciation for what families really are experiencing. And that's not to say that everyone experiences the same thing. It's different for everybody, but
I don't think moms are good at taking their own advice. You know, like I can support the heck out of another mom, or I'm a stepmom as well, another stepmom. I can do all sorts of things, but when it comes to my own, like even I put out weekly, you know, anxiety, like mental health
reminders,
you know, recommendations for kids. And then when my daughter's anxious, I'm like, what do I do?
Exactly.
I tell people every week, here's what you do. But then when it comes to me, I'm almost like, all of a sudden, like when you take first aid and you're like, okay, I know this, but when something's going to happen, it's like, you're going to be that moment like, oh my God, what do I do?
It's almost like that do as I say and not as I do kind of thing, right? It's like, I'm really good at teaching and I'm not so good at like practicing. I find I run into that often as well.
We need to take our own advice. That's what I say to myself all the time too. Take your own advice. What would you tell? I always say to people, what would you tell your best friend right now? And then that's what you should do, because you would always give them the best advice that you could, but we need to start learning to do that ourselves.
Exactly. And we need to start becoming our own best friend, right? So that becomes a little bit more natural to have that level of, you know, compassion when we are having those conversations with ourselves as well. Which is so much easier said than done.
That's actually a really good point, because it's hard to become your own best friend, right? Because it's easier to see the qualities and the traits of someone else than to look at your own. You know, it's kind of hard to see your own. Well, it shouldn't be, but it shouldn't be, because if it is, if you make it yourself to be your best friend, your own best friend, you have more chance to succeed in your own life, right? So it's
exactly
it's exciting that way. So with your kid having this diagnosis and having this experience now on a different side of the field, have you, like, is your organization focused a lot on bringing parents and support with families with persons with diagnosis, or is all within the community with all different qualities of life, if you know what I mean? So
so I actually I run two different kind of organizations. The other one is called Medical Mama Collective, and it's really for anybody who identifies as a medical mom, whether that be, you know, your kiddo does have a diagnosis of cerebral palsy or autism, or you know, as my daughter did, she went through chemotherapy for quite a while, or your child has a heart condition, they've gone through surgeries. There's no like one size fits all. And I think the definition is just, we use it very, very loosely. It's a very inclusive environment to support those moms who are going through anything that feels heavy with their child in relation to their child.
And it feels heavy.
Is there any particular tips that you give to those families or to the moms, mostly if they're like single moms, or I don't know if there might be single dads out there too, you know, that are going through, you know, through a challenging time. Because the reason why I ask you this question is because when I was born, I always was told by my mom that she was never prepared to have somebody that has cerebral palsy, or that's born with cerebral palsy. And she always keeps reminding me that she wishes that at the time that I was born, she would have had some sort of tips and some sort of guidance towards, you know, how to raise a child with cerebral palsy, or any other, in this case, cerebral palsy. But I can imagine other families who are going through different diagnoses that they might feel with their hands tied up, you know, of what to do. Is there specific tips that you have that you give to those families in particular?
You know, I think that so much of what really can make the difference is opening yourself up to a community of people who you don't have to explain yourself to, who understand it, right? And you know, when my daughter was first, when she was first diagnosed, and we found out she was, you know, she was only 19 months old, we were told that she'd be going through at least 19 months of chemotherapy. And I didn't feel like I had a support system in place that understood me. And even if, and I've heard this from so many other moms that I've connected with, even you could be surrounded by 100 people, but if they haven't gone through something similar to what you're going through, you feel alone, you feel isolated. And that's why we're really building this community, is to provide that sense of connection, to provide kind of that feeling of home where you can show up and just be as you are, and not have to explain or to you know, even like process. It allows you that opportunity to process by sharing in these circles, by bouncing ideas off of other women. You know, whether everyone's at a different phase in their journey of their child's diagnosis and what that looks like. There's a lot of grief and yet love for your child exactly as they are, which can be very confusing. And I think having somewhere to really explore those feelings is imperative. I know for me, that's what I found very, very helpful, was having community, allowing myself to be vulnerable and not being performative. You know, I remember when my daughter was first diagnosed, people kept saying to me, and I get it, they don't know what else to say, but they would say, stay strong, stay strong. I didn't feel strong to begin with, so I felt like I had already failed. And allowing myself to be vulnerable enough to actually open myself up to say, I'm not okay right now. There's a lot of things happening, as opposed to for so long, I was like, we got this, it's okay, it's what it is. You end up almost going into this like toxic positivity when you're not actually processing what's happening. These are big things, right? And I think there is a level of, as you said, not being prepared. There's a level of shock. There's a level of,
absolutely, there is.
Yeah, and kind of grief for what you imagined your child's life to be, and then just adapting to that, because it can be so much more beautiful exactly as it is, with these diagnoses, with these challenges, but you have to allow yourself to get to that place first.
And that's actually a really good thing, because sometimes we try to be, I don't know, Leah, you might have a better better way of seeing it, but sometimes we try to make ourselves stronger, you know, and don't try to be vulnerable in a way. You know, I know, for example, my mom didn't used to want to see her cry, because I used to be like, you know, I used to scream really loud when I had physiotherapy, and I'm like, Mom, can you please help me? And I was bawling, and she didn't want to see herself, you know, break it down. So I guess in my sense, I started to learn that because she did that, in a way, I didn't like to see myself broken either. I don't like to see myself broken, but at the end of the day, you're saying this and you're reminding us that it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to have a community of support, because sometimes it feels wrong to ask for help. You know, for me, it's so hard to ask for help even at work here when, you know, I mean, yeah, you know me, right? So it's hard for me to even say, oh, I can't pick up my crutches, can you help me pick up, you know,
Yes,
crutches?
exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's hard for that, but it's a good reminder, and thank you for saying that, Sarah, that we need to be more vulnerable in a way of how our life goes, and be okay with asking help in the community. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a good thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
finding a safe
remembering,
space.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say finding a safe space is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And just being able to, you know, show up and ask for help without even having to say anything, right? Like we run virtual support groups, support circles for these moms at no charge. And
Okay.
that's something that we say as well, is you don't even have to say anything. You can just show up and listen.
And
There
listen.
might be something that somebody else is going through that is going to resonate with you, that you might be needing to hear at that exact moment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know in my journey too, we had access to social workers and psychologists and very, very educated professionals who have a very specific job and a purpose and a time and a place. But what I found was, no matter how much I was talking to these people, I knew that they didn't know what it felt like.
Right.
And
right.
Okay.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so it was hard for me to actually open up because I didn't feel like we were actually able to relate to each other.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. And I learned a lot through my stepmom support group, because, you know, at first I was like, well, why would you need a stepmom support group? But then it's like, it's hard. It's a hard thing. And then, you know, I found that, you know, creating a safe space for moms to come into the Facebook group and just say, like, you know, I hate this. You know, I hate this, when it's like, you couldn't admit that to anybody else, because most people would say, well, you knew when you were getting involved. And it's like, well, but we didn't know about all this other stuff that was going to happen. And then I would find myself almost looking for the negative things, so I could go in there and be like, oh my God, this is what happened. And it's like, but it was a safe space to do it. And then I finally learned that, no, it's okay. Like, you have to learn to digest and, you know, look at it again. And then, it's a process. It's interesting. It can take a while before, you get up the nerve. A lot of people are like that in support groups. I think you kind of sit back and absorb, and then you can kind of, you know, come out and say what you need. But I think that's a huge thing. And that's my first thing I always tell somebody who might be new to in a relationship with someone who has kids. I always say, you need to find your community, start there, and then, you know, all these other things. But yeah,
and it makes all the difference. I think as human beings, we have such a fear of judgment that we do everything we can to avoid feeling judgment, right? And so saying, this is really hard, I'm really scared, I don't know what to do, that's tough. That's tough. And it's not something that comes lightly. And as I said, you know, it took me hitting my very, 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 very rock bottom. Because for so many months, I look at it now and I think I numbly went into survival mode and just kept going. And when we received the initial diagnosis, I cried, but I think for the next 5 months, 6 months, I didn't cry, even though I was watching my daughter's hair fall out and her go through all of these really difficult situations. I was so stuck in that, I guess, that mode of, I got this, I have to be strong for her, I have to be strong for everybody else who is worried about her, right? Everyone else has their own feelings about situations in life too. And so being able to, I guess, Carlos, that's the other tip that I would have for people, is to actually allow yourself to focus on yourself, pay attention to yourself. It doesn't make you selfish. It is absolutely necessary to tune in, to slow down, to honor your own feelings, your own desires, and remember that you also get to have enjoyment in life, even when things are hard, without the guilt and the judgment we put on ourselves, right?
Yeah. Moms do that.
Oh, absolutely. Moms,
I think everyone does. Yeah.
Everybody puts their guilt on something that happened, and it's very important what you're saying, because it's a very eye-opening for me. Very, very eye-opening, because I don't know, I never had the opportunity to have a support or a caregiver, or an aide person, but I did, because I grew up in Mexico. We grew up in a very independent style thing. So many families don't even have the financial resources to have something like that. And when you come to Canada and you find organizations like yourselves who are actively opening their doors in a way of saying, hey, we're here to help families like yourself to help you deal with your situation, and don't make it a burden. Don't make you feel like this is a burden for you. It's something really eye-opening for me, because again, in Mexico, the caregivers are the family members, either the grandmas, their aunties, their parents. Sometimes the parents cannot even go and okay, or to places, because they have to work, and then they have to take kids to physio, or to a chemotherapy place, anywhere. It's not, we don't have that. And to find out that there's a place here in Canada like yours, it's just incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And Carlos's mom, it's never too late. Join the community still. You probably have a lot to offer.
Come and find us. Yeah, I think, as you're saying, Carlos, it's it doesn't, I think, again, one thing that we do as people in general, but as moms in the medical community, is we suffer from what I call comparisonitis. And it's that feeling of, I shouldn't feel this way because at least it's not blank, and it was interesting to me, because I was having these conversations with these moms who, as you're saying, Carlos, they are they're the chauffeur, and they're the therapy team at home, and they're the nurse, and they're all these things, and they're saying, like, and they don't know anything about my story at this time, and they're talking about things that are going on for them, and I'm supporting them through that, having those conversations, and in an effort to show some relatability, I share pieces of my story, and I watch these people shut down, and they say, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't imagine what that feels like. But you can imagine what it feels like, because you just explained everything that I'm also feeling. And so even though it might look different on the outside, it often feels very similar on the inside, right?
Yeah.
And it's not about, I think, like, it's not about your child receiving a diagnosis and life can never be good again, and this is so hard. It's about processing that so that you can move on and enjoy your child's life and your life, and help them reach their full potential, because you are present, because you have processed these things, and now you're able to move through that.
Yeah, everyone's feelings are valid. And just because, yes, it could always be worse. Everybody, always says, oh, but it could be worse. And it's like, well, yeah, it could be. But if you feel a certain way, you feel a certain way, feel it.
Exactly.
That's what I tell my daughter when she has her feelings. I'm like, your feelings are valid. You're allowed to feel it. Be depressed today. That's okay. But then you have to start at some point moving forward and getting out of that, and processing it. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Process the feelings and learn to feel them, and carry on while you're feeling them at the same time. And because, yeah, I mean, wow, you're busy.
So to go back a little bit on this conversation, Sarah, the families that you are supporting at the moment, because you have been supporting them for a while now, for quite some time, have you got families like, do you have any goals in mind? Like you said, okay, let's do this, support this family for 5 years, support this family for 6 years, or maybe less, or maybe a lifetime. How's that work within your organization?
Yeah, so I've thought about providing, I guess, so I have a certification in life and mindset coaching as well, which I got prior to my whole experience, and then it all just kind of has fit together. And I thought about, offering courses that are this, then this, then this, then this, and that's how you get through things. But I've really had to reflect on that because it ebbs and flows. Life is always going to ebb and flow, and it's not linear. You don't just move through it and then it's done, right? It's a matter of having the access to those supports when you need them, and whether that looks like 10 years from now or right now when everything is happening, it's still required. And so, no, I wouldn't say that it's really like this phase of, well, you require this support for this many years. It's ongoing. It's really ongoing. And so even for us right now, my daughter finished chemotherapy in October. She does have a genetic condition which predisposes her to 7 other types of childhood cancer. And so every 3 months we are going into imaging, wondering if something grew again. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's right now we technically finished active treatment, but I actually feel worse coming out of active treatment than we did in it. Because now it feels like, do we actually allow ourselves to move on with our life and feel, do everything that we can to feel quote unquote normal, worst word for it, but or do we kind of just continue with caution because the rug could get pulled out anytime again? And that's what it felt like, is life was just flipped on its head. And now we live in that state at times of, well, how long until the other shoe drops? Well, she has a central port in her chest, which is supposed to come out, but we are terrified to do that before she has another imaging. And so, yeah, I don't think there's a linear process for saying how long you feel like you might need support. And even if, for example, with our virtual support circles, even if you come for 3 months and you're like, you know what? I feel really good right now. I'm going to skip that for a bit. Who's to say that a year down the road, you don't need to come and have a quick drop in, right? And it's about having that support when things feel good too, right? It's not just reaching out when you're struggling. It's about being celebrated for the wins in life, for the success, for, your nonverbal kiddo who just pointed to something for the first time. That's huge. Your kid who was told they would never walk just took a step. Come and celebrate. We want to celebrate that. We want to acknowledge how far your child has come, but also how far your family has come.
And that's great to hear. That's great to hear, because that means that, well, I mean that your organization will be continuing for years and years, hopefully, right?
That's the hope.
And the more impact you do, the more it will continue. And I think it sounds like what you're doing is great. It's fantastic. So I think you're gonna impact the more and more people for many, many more years to come, for sure.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
No, for sure. I think, you will. And I like the idea, like when you were talking about, kind of like survival, like how getting parents to figure that out. I mean, there's lots of places that do specialize in that. So it's like, could you imagine joining forces? You know, like that's what we love at CP Alberta. We love collaborating and seeing who, like, because we don't want to copy, you know, we don't want to copy what somebody else is doing. So if we can fill another gap that maybe you can't fill, like, we just love that idea, and just creating this community and where people can go one place and then they can go, okay, yeah, no, you're good here. Now, why don't you go over to this place? They can help you with this part.
Absolutely.
And then it's not so overwhelming, I hope.
Yeah. Well, it's my hope in the future too, to offer even, you know, 1 day or weekend long retreats for these medical moms, where they really can get the time to reset their nervous system, connect, and be able to kind of return to the day-to-day life feeling like themselves again, you know, reconnecting with themselves. I think that's a big one too, is that so many people are like, I don't know who I am anymore.
Yes.
I don't know what I need anymore, or what I like. I've only focused on my child, my job, my partner for all these years. And now I finally have taken the time to look at me, and I don't recognize myself. And so giving those women the opportunity to rediscover themselves.
And that's interesting that you're touching on that, because I personally thought, I don't know about you, Leah, but I personally thought that people only go through those stages of like, I don't know where I'm going, or I don't know what I'm doing with my life, or, you know, at a certain age between, I don't know, between 25 and 30, or like 20 to 25. But it's interesting to know that there's moms out there who feel this way, you know, like, because I'm like, you know, I look at Leah, for example, and I look at my mom, or I look at, you know, all the women we have in our office who are moms, and I'm just going, well, they know where they're going, you know, they have everything figured out, and you know, and then you find out, oh, actually, some of them don't, some of them, you know, some of them are struggling, but you know, so it doesn't make me feel as bad that I felt like that, you know, because
it's a weird thing. And even like with Audrey, I mean, she just has anxiety and ADHD. So, I mean, it's not, you know, like we don't have a ton of appointments to go to and all this and that, but
comparisonitis.
Yeah. See, I just did it, right? See, it's real. It's a struggle. It's real, but it is. I'm trying to be like, but, you know, even when she was able, you know, to stay home by herself for a little bit, I was like, oh, wow, this opens up. But then I was like, what do I want to do? And then all I wanted to do was like hang out with her. I was like, oh no, I want to take her shopping, or I take her to my mom's for an afternoon. And then I'm like, ooh, I'm going to spend the afternoon doing whatever I want. And then I literally have no idea what to do with myself.
Yeah.
I get lost. And then if I go home and I'm like, okay, then what do I want to do? I want to clean, because now I've got some time to clean. Or I think, oh, I'm going to do some knitting, but then I end up scrolling TikTok for like 2 hours and I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it starts with like little steps, right? I mean, I currently actually have a 3.5-year-old daughter, but a 3-month-old baby too. And so getting time to myself is a rarity.
Whatever.
Yeah. But I think it starts with those little moments, right? Where you take a second, even 1 second, to check in with yourself and say, what do I need right now? Fresh air. Perfect. I'm going to open a window. Yeah, maybe you don't have time to go for a hike in the mountains at this very moment, even though you know that would feel really good for you.
Right.
But there are other options, and just implementing little pieces and allowing that to add up. So those tiny little check-ins, right? And I think we've talked so much about moms and medical moms, but dads feel it too. I'm not a dad, so that's why I focus on moms, but I don't want to single out the dads, right? This is all applicable to dads as well. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so true. Wow. So, well, it sounds like you're living your career life without limits. You're not limiting yourself to anything. But what about just like when you do have your downtime? Like, are you, if you have any, I'm not really sure right now, you might not have any, but you know, do you feel like you're living a life without limits? And are you? you know, like what is your...
Before that question, sorry, Leah,
Oh, sure.
can we, like, I know that we talked about a lot. You always bring the whole question about mental health, Leah, and I'm not sure if we touching on about it, but I just wanted to, Leah always touch base on what do you do, Sarah, in this case? You talk a little bit about thinking about ourselves and thinking about to open up a window if we need fresh air. But what do you do to keep you have 2 businesses, you have children that you have to take care of. But what do you do yourself to take care of your mental health? Like, what do you do to keep your mental health?
Self-care.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah. Self-care. Quite honestly, I am very, very grateful. I will give a quick shout out to the YMCA because
Yes.
I recently discovered that if I get a membership to the gym or to the facility, my 3-month-old daughter gets free childcare 3 days a week for 2 hours. So I am maximizing on that. I 3 days a week go to the gym. You know, the ladies at the child minding where I drop her off, they've said, if your workout doesn't last the full 2 hours, go get a coffee, go in the hot tub, do something. And so I haven't done that yet, but I do plan to, right?
And permission.
Yeah. And allowing myself again to be present. I think there is a lot going on right now. And what's tough is I'm so passionate about the work I'm doing. It's hard for me to put those boundaries in place because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so for me, it is almost like a level of self-care to be able to tune into these projects. And, but you know, I take my daughter to swimming lessons on Wednesdays, and even though I'm 3 months postpartum and it's not my favorite thing to do, I throw on my swimsuit and we go swimming for a couple of hours. Right. Yeah. And just finding those small windows, it adds up a lot over the week. And so, you know, when you first started asking that question, what do I do to take care of my own mental health or self-care? I kind of panicked because I'm like, again, do as I say and not as I do. But I just realized I am doing those things. And and honoring myself and my need for those pieces as well.
Well,
Movement.
Thank you for that. And sorry, Leah, that I cut you off.
No, that's okay. No, you're right. I usually do say something about it. And then I didn't know if the Life Without Limits would lead into it. But then I think also maybe you touching on what you're doing to try to have your daughter live a life without limits. Like you said, those times when you have that little bit of, okay, like you don't have to go in for imaging for a little while. So like, are you living it up, you know, as best as you guys can, those in between times? Or, you know, like, are you feeling like whatever it means to you, this life without limits and what you do?
Yeah. So I think it, again, it changes day to day, right? There's some days where I'm like, we're going to the park and the zoo and we're doing all these fun things just because we can.
Yeah.
And I'm sure my kid is so confused because some days I'm like, rah, rah, we're doing it all. And then the next days it's like, let's just cuddle and watch a movie. Right. And I think, again, like teaching our children that that's okay too.
Yeah.
It's okay to have days where you don't feel like going crazy and doing all of these things. Right. But I know we had talked a little bit too about like what to me a life without limits actually means and what that looks like. And it's so much about having, you know, like the tools and the support required to overcome any roadblocks that come up in life, including and not limited to, but including like the limitations that we put on ourselves, we put on others, and that others put on us, right? And having a life without limits means that we're able to overcome those pieces, and we're able to overcome the self-imposed limitations that we're creating. We're able to, you know, I've worked with so many families who've had medical professionals say, like, define what their child is and isn't going to be able to do. And I think the only person who gets to make that decision is that child. And it's our responsibility to put those supports in place, to offer those tools and those supports to help them overcome those roadblocks. And I think that applies to everybody as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not allowing any of those limitations to define what we're capable of.
Right. Oh,
As Leah know, I love this question because it's always a different answer. And thank you
yeah,
for
I love it.
responding to that question, Sarah, because it is through the many guests we have had through the entire almost 2.5 years now of the podcast. It's been so many different answers, and I think yours is amazing as well. I really enjoyed it, and thank you so much for that.
This is a very valuable episode. I think you're going to
super valuable.
Really resonate with a lot of people, a lot of mamas especially, but a lot of people. And I think it's valuable. Very much.
Valuable.
And I even think it's gonna, surprise some people that are gonna listen and be like, oh.
Oh, wait a minute. It's not just me, right?
Yeah, it's not just me. What's going on?
Yeah. And that's the beauty of community. And that's the beauty of having, this podcast and being able to share with other people, is that we can have those epiphanies of, oh, it's not just me. Oh, this is normal. Oh, it's okay to not feel okay right now.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And if you're listening and you have that thought right now and you want to talk about it, you let me know. We'll get you on the podcast and you can, tell your story too. We love that. That's what we're here for.
And if you need support with some aid or talk to Sarah about any sport, just reach out to us. They will be on our Leah will put them on the description, right, Leah?
Yeah, I will put all your information there so people know where to find you. And I passed on your info to our social workers at CP Alberta, so they also know, just another resource out there. If
do you have an Instagram page, Sarah, that you wanna share with people, or a Facebook page, or?
Sure, yeah. So we have an Instagram page for both. So the Instagram for Reach Higher Support Services is at Reach Higher YYC, and the Instagram for Medical Mama Collective is at Medical Mama Collective.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Perfect.
That's awesome.
No,
well,
that's great.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your time. Thank you so much for all the wonderful information, the wonderful expertise you brought to us, because even though this might be, I know this might be, as Leah says, an eye-opener for mothers, but even for dads or for single persons like myself who, who needed to have their eyes open in so many things through this show podcast today. Leah, do you have any last thoughts you want to?
No, I'm just excited to see how you grow and what you're going to do, and just looking forward to following along and sharing all the info and working together in that way. Definitely.
Yeah, wonderful. I really, really appreciate the support. And, we welcome anybody, as I said, anybody that resonates and feels like it would be worthwhile, then come find us, join us, reach out. Perfect. Yeah, we're happy to help.
That's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, again. And thank you all of you who are listening today during the podcast, whether you're in the car, you're in your home, you're cleaning your house, you're just sending your kids to school, whatever you're doing. Thank you so much for listening.
And it's not just my mom. I'm learning it's more people.
There's more people
are coming out and commenting and saying, "Oh, we're going to listen to this one too." And I'm just like, "Oh my God, you're listening!" And
it is more people. So it's exciting to hear a lot of people are listening. And please continue to share our Instagram page, continue to reach out to us on Facebook. Any way you want to do this, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much once again to our audience. Thank you so much to Sarah. Thank you, Leah, again for bringing such a wonderful guest. And to all of you, have yourself a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.